Here on the Creative Thinker Podcast, we discuss all theories, philosophy, and thought behind the creative process. And we hope that you find some inspiration along the way.
Hello and welcome to the Creative Thinker Podcast. My name is Henry Moon and I am joined by
Michael, the immortal Mexican Vasquez.
Heck yeah. So anywhere you are in the world, thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about the area of effect in writing.
Oh, really? That's what we're talking about today?
Very exciting stuff. So it's going to be the area of effect of your characters, your quests, your locations, and anything else that you know about the world. We're going to be trying to get into the nitty gritty of our worlds and trying to make them as big and rich, like the country star, as we can, as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So that's the plan today. We're going to get right into AOE in writing. Michael, what's up?
I was about to ask you, what is your, when you are thinking about...
Tripped you up on purpose there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. When you're thinking about area of effect in writing, what does your mind go to? And what is your thought process on that? I know we talked briefly about it before the podcast, but I wanted to see how your brain works, because I think we have two different approaches to AOE in our world building.
Yeah, so for me, it comes down to characters mainly. And so like I've talked about Bellamy or One Eye on the podcast endlessly, just because he is the character that took the most work for me, and was not a character that I planned anything for. And then he turned into one of the main characters in the campaign. So for him, I had to build out his entire schedule to understand who he is and what his effect was in the world. And I went from, so his, again, to remind the people listening, pardon me, that he is basically the greeter in Nassau. It was a pirate campaign. He's a goblin. He has one eye and one leg. And so he goes by One Eye. He has a donkey and a cart, and that's it. That's all he has to his name. So he went from this character that was just meant to ferry my player characters into town to now basically being adopted and being like the moody teen of the campaign. Mm-hmm. And, he has like girlfriends, and it's like, it's this whole thing. Anyway, so for me to take him from his original form of a nobody plebe, more or less, for the campaign, taking people into town, into what he is now, I asked myself questions backwards. Like, what is his area of influence or effect? What does he do during the day? So during the day, he just takes people from the dock into town, from the town down to the dock. He asks for tips. That's how he gets his food. Okay, that's not very interesting in terms of world effect. Maybe he has a special stall that he goes to in town where he leaves his cart and donkey. Maybe there is somebody in town who feeds his donkey for him. So maybe there's like a bakery he goes by. He doesn't know the guy in there necessarily, but the guy in there likes his donkey. So he feeds the donkey and not him, right? So maybe there's some effect there. But I found the most interesting effect was, where does he go to sleep? So there was a part of the town that he was in where he would sleep, and it was where like most of the poor people in town slept. And so because of that, it was like, okay, well, what do the other poor people in town do? Maybe they clean, maybe they wash. And there's really only one establishment that has jobs like that, which was that I had planned already, which was a bar. And so I figured, like, this is a pretty good spy network he has. This is a great hub of gossip in Nassau, is him and the people he spends his nights with. Maybe they just share information. He also takes people to and from town. So he gets a lot of information about what boats are there, who's coming and going, all that stuff, like what their allegiances are. If he asks them why they're in town and they're new, then he's going to be the first one with that information. So maybe he makes some money there too. But that's what I mean. That is the shortest example I can give of what I feel like area of effect is. It's just taking the things that I know about a story and building off of them as fast as I can. So like if I asked a question, like where does One Eye get his food? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that right away. Mm-hmm. That's not something that springs to mind for me.
Yeah.
And instead of like guilting myself about it or like forcing myself to come up with an answer, I just say, okay, that's not something I know anything about right now. I'm moving on, just right away. And then I'm going to ask myself the next question. It's the exponential creation method, but it's more pointed towards a character, a quest, a location. It's just more targeted. So
And now, so you do this with Bellamy. How many characters do you do this with? Is this something you do with a lot of your NPCs? Is this something you do with, when we were talking about our NPC tier list? Is this your S, A, and B tier list? Do you spend a lot of time doing this? Is this something you just, I'm going to spend 30 minutes trying to figure out what this NPC does? What's your time frame on that?
it's probably SABC character list, SABC location list. I mean, it's pretty in depth. I would say like most of my planning is done like this.
Gotcha.
This is all the time that I prep for a session. I'm spending doing this, and even down to like magical or legendary artifacts and things like that. Anything that I'm not doing impromptu in the moment, I'm doing this with because I want to be able to give my players a really rich experience. Like if they find a sword that I've left in the game or a trident, I want it to feel like it is like that trident that your character found. I wanted it to feel like this has been in the world for a really long time and people have used it, and it has history. It has scars on it. It is its own element in the world. And so when you pick it up, I need people to revere it. I need there to be a certain way, a certain ritual that you have to go through to attain it. I need all of those things to happen, and I don't look at it as I don't look at it as quest building at this point in time. So like, let's say 80-20. 80% of the time I spend doing AoE writing, and then the other 20% is quest building. And so like the quest building portion would be like, what exactly structurally do I need to get them from where they're at to the endpoint of being this trident? And then the rest of the time is like building that mystique and building it into the world. What's the effect of that item, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes sense now that you say that that's your prepping, because I feel like a lot of the characters felt very fleshed out and felt very much like they were living of and in the world that you created. And some of the stuff that we did was like, oh snap, like the world is these characters know how to react to the world very quickly, where I feel like some of the times when I'm prepping or if I'm improving NPCs, they will not necessarily react. I have to improv how they're going to react and then try to get in their headspace. And it takes me a moment to actually get in that space where they react and are acting like how the world should act. But I felt like all the NPCs like were right away. Like they were very much like, okay, you just did this, and now their reaction is this because they're in the world. They know how they're gonna react to certain situations. I really like that.
Oh, thank you.
That's good.
And that's like especially okay. So my favorite thing I've ever done. Now that you got me talking, my favorite thing I've ever done is a city I created called New Elysium in one of my worlds. The pirate one, obviously. That's what I talk about the most. I love pirates, so here we are. Anyway, so there's 3 factions in that city: the Fae, Giants, and Goliath. And just the interplay of those factions, and the different notable figures within those factions, I had created, and that's not anything to write home about in and of itself, but because I had those 3 factions and the outline or the structure of those 3 factions, I was able to throw in things like when my players first got into town, then they immediately sort of got swept up into this like almost human trafficking thing where they took them to be gladiators in their arena. Because I knew the characters that my PCs were playing were a little bit gullible to begin with and like very eager to participate in the world. I was like, bet, here we go. So they were Goliaths, gladiators within minutes of being in town. And so that was a really cool element of like, I was able to create the entire underbelly of the city because I knew how they could operate between the factions. I understood that there was space between these power elements that could be occupied really easily by criminals. And that gave me a much better idea of what those criminals looked like and who they preyed on. So like anybody who's not giant, Goliath, or Fae is immediately going to be swept up into whatever these schemes are because they're just throwaway people. They're not somebody that any of those factions care about.
Gotcha.
Which means they're, ripe for the picking, so to speak. So it helps to work backwards from everything that I know in the world. For me, it helps me work quickly and helps me, like you say, add those effects that make them feel like they're in the world because everybody is reacting to everyone else. And if they're not, then like we talked about in one of the podcasts, like people have identifying markers or like behave in a certain way that it's like, if I meet a guy who's wearing board shorts and a backboard baseball cap, I've got a general idea how he's going to behave.
Right. Yeah.
But this is in your story and you're creating all those archetypes and things. And so if you have that shorthand, once you see that person, you can work back about how everybody in their life behaves around them and things like that. It's a great shorthand for role playing and getting to improv. Yeah. So what about you? What's your method, or what's your definition of AoE writing?
I guess my definition, I mean, it's still like this area of effect, but of course, where I am, my main source of writing and storytelling is through D&D. So a lot of what I like to do is it's going to be the consequences of the actions of my players, is that AoE type style, because I was not prepped as a DM before I started. It was a lot of reaction and in the world building. So whenever my characters or my player characters would do something, I would then have to start world building about the actions that they took. And I think the biggest thing for me was, I've mentioned the high table plenty of times on the podcast. Getting into when y'all defeated the high table, what that really looked like for the city, for Tartarus, who was the leader, for the person above Tartarus, and the whole organization, as like one of the Continentals just got burned down to the ground. And what did that mean for Feinstar? What does that mean for the governor? What does that mean for, again, the high table? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for Jewel? And then I really had to sit down and look and think about all of these boss characters and see what's their reaction and how are they going to retaliate. If they're going to retaliate, are they going to like hold a grudge? Are they going to employ somebody else and really build out their factions, right? Because the high table was my own faction, but the people in it still had their own connections, and that I was able to create that. So Tartarus, in and of itself, he was supposed to be the big bad from Halo 2, and so he was supposed to be this kind of imposing figure. But what's the background behind him? And then I really went into that and like where his clan is from, and where are the rest of the Jiralhanae from, and how he, when you ended up fighting him again in Meridian, because he was disgraced, he lost his position of power, which he was in that position of power because his clan wanted him to be in that position of power. So he had to try to restore his honor by fighting you, by winning this honor back. And
we
lost.
We had fought, just for people listening, in the campaign, we had fought like 3 or 4 times, knocked down, drag out, like, having to be saved from death just about every time. Everybody involved, more or less. I mean, it was gritty and rough.
It was a super gang war of D&D, and at that point they knew that resurrection magic was a thing, and they were fighting for each other's bodies. Between your character and Tartarus, they were like huddling and casting Revivify or casting healing spells and pulling them back and pulling this way back, and they're doing everything they could just to keep the bodies of these people, which was wild. And this fight, that was the first fight, I think, and then the second fight was the burning of the building, and then the third fight, I think, was in Meridian later, and that's when he actually had to go and grab his clan and do their honor. But I created their whole clan. I started again, that area of effect from all of those things. It really pushed me to write, like, what is the clan's view on the high table? What is the clan's view on this? What is the clan's view on Feinstar's finest? What is the clan's view on the rest of the world. What is their view on the warrior cultures around? And I really made a lot of Allegatia to be like this warrior kind of culture because it's D&D, and that's what I really like. So that's where that area of effect started with just Tartarus, and I really like expanding on that. So then whenever you go and be like, oh, Tartarus was doing this to protect the index and to keep the index under his eye, later on it comes out that that's what he's trying to do, and it's been a big plot point for our characters. Then it's like, oh crap, like that world building started because I started doing this AoE kind of world building and backtracking and being okay, now this is gonna relate by this way. And I was kind of doing like the crazy string theory, with all the strings in the background. It's like this all connects by this and this and this. So that's how I like to do it. It's not beneficial probably to do it that way because like I said, sometimes my NPCs don't necessarily feel like they're in the world.
But I feel like you do a lot of consequence and then structure.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a really cool thing in that as somebody who's played through it for years is you sort of know where you're at in the power structure and you know where the person across from you is. And so you sort of know whether you have any leverage over them, whether you have any say over what's going on, or if they're much too powerful or whatever. You have a much better idea of where you're grounded in the power structure in the way you do things. And it's also like, I feel like it allows you, the way you create allows you to tackle bigger and bigger things, like stuff I don't think I would ever even broach in a campaign. Like, like when you get towards level 20 closer, then you start fighting things like world powers and gods and things like that, angels, whatever, demons. And I wouldn't even broach that as a DM. Like, one, because I'm bad with the rules. I think I make up my own rules based off of what I know of the actual rules, which is very little.
Yeah.
And so it allows you, because of your version of your definition of how you do AoE writing, like if I feel like it allows you to very quickly create a structure in your world, which is cool, even to things that are huge.
Yeah, and that's what I had to do for the main quest of one of the player characters, was because if you know anything about Halo, there's the index in Halo, and that's the activation to the Halo ring. I introduced it to my story. I didn't want it to be exactly the same. I wanted it to have some type of twist. We started talking about quest last week and having that twist. I had to explain to Molly quite a bit that what had happened was
what had happened was the index was a power source for a ritual that ended up killing Bahamut. But I had to spend a lot of time thinking about what is the area of effect of the index. What does this mean for my story? What does this mean for my world? And I really had to start dropping hints here and there and spend a lot of time really thinking about what does it actually mean when your player characters are playing on a Halo ring, and all the Halo rings are around you, and all, like I said, the Dyson spheres are up in the sky, and you see planetoids and stuff. And it's going to completely change the game from here on out. And what does that mean? And I've had to spend a lot of time, even in between sessions, planning out everything because of how big of a deal it is, to where we're playing, like we're probably having like a month or two in between each session at this point. One, partially schedules. I finally know my days off, by the way.
Oh, well, that's nice. But it's partially schedules and partially like I need time to plan and prep, because now at this point, each fight is going to be drastic and it's going to have some type of effect. And the decisions you make are going to have these crazy effects. And I really need to spend time. Y'all make the decision, and then what are the consequences to those decisions, worldwide, ring-wide, universe-wide, to my world.
Yeah, I think that's super cool, just because it does always feel like what we're doing affects everything. And there's been times where I know we've sat around the table and gone like where we almost get like crippled by the decision. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, the decision's in front of you. Okay, it's time to metagame for a while and talk about what the consequences might be,
Yeah.
and try to land on what's the best decision.
Mhm.
And I hadn't really thought about that before now, but that is a really cool part of the campaign, is that we're sat around, like we have to have almost a philosophical discussion at every session,
Yeah.
because it matters what we do.
Mhm.
And that is a cool element to have just like built into the way you do things. It's
Mhm.
almost like, because of how you prepare, we will inevitably have those like philosophical discussions at the table, which is super fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really comes from just seeing so many different forms of media and how they've done it. Like God of War did a really good job in storytelling and making things those kind of philosophical questions. And I feel like stories, certain games and certain shows are really pushing that barrier for you to really think about, are they doing the right thing, or is this morally ambiguous quest? What is the lesser evil to choose, or are you fighting for the greater good? What is the greater good? And so bringing that into the world, and really backtracking it and then expanding out on that area of effect, it's challenging. It really is challenging. I don't have like a great structure to it, aside from, okay, we're going to take this character and how do they, what's their role in the world now at this point.
It's like, it's a gray area moral question in a game about killing stuff, which is just
right.
It's really entertaining, because
Uh-huh.
it is a game that's just about, okay, go kill this thing and then come back. And that's the way the game is structured. But then like the way you've done it is like, there's so many moral questions in there that makes it fun.
Mhm.
So that's super cool. I want to get into a little bit more specific.
Yeah.
We've talked about Ruin several times, and we're probably going to continue to talk about it for a while. Here or there. I'm not going to try to bore the audience with it necessarily, but we're definitely going to keep bringing this up until we feel like we've completed a viable fantasy city. So anyway, we just had an episode about that, and I want to show you guys in action what AoE writing looks like. So we're going to take our NPCs, we're going to take our quests, and we're going to talk about it a little bit, and we're going to start asking questions about what we know about the world based on those questions.
Mhm.
So that is what we're going to be doing for the rest of the episode here, as well as our inspiration, because let's be honest, the way we can keep creating is to keep being inspired. And so we try to throw these things out here for you to find something that you wouldn't normally be inspired by. So definitely, we still have the option on all of our episodes to send us a message or to support the podcast. So consider doing both of those. Anytime you have a question about what we're talking about, anytime that you want to share what you're inspired by, anything else, send us a message. So let's start with Avasia, that first quest we did last week.
Mm-hmm. Who was Avasia again? For the audience.
Of course, yes. So Avasia was the little kid who lost his friend at the house on the hill, who was then possessed by like vines, and they had to retrieve the friend. So
I think we forgot to say that last time, that he also got possessed.
Oh, Avasia?
Did we say that he was going to get possessed too, or no?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Sarah was the one who was possessed, and they
Yes.
saved.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yes. So Avasia is and his friend Sarah are both kids from this town, Ruin.
Mhm.
They're very young. What do we know about them? Other than they play in the abandoned part of town. Why did they do that? How do they get away from town? Like, what's the first fact about them that jumps out at you?
Dude, they love fun. They love adventure. They love to climb things. They love to get their hands dirty, right? Like, just think about when I think about when I was a kid, and we would go out in the subdivision that we lived in. We didn't have a lot of houses there. There was a lot of farmland still, and like it had just been transitioned into being more subdivisions, we were riding our bikes through there all the time. We were going houses we shouldn't be going into. We were jumping fences we shouldn't be going, and going into people's yards just to get to our friends' fences or our friends' yards. So I kind of envision that, where they're probably a part of, I don't know, 5 or 6 kids that like to go out and adventure. These two are probably the more adventurous spirits, because even though like I was able to go out there and be adventurous, I still had a little bit of hesitation to that. But these people probably have like no hesitation. They're ready to rock and roll all the time. They're ready to climb up. They're like, I bet you won't do it. They're like, yes, I will. So I think they kind of have that attitude. They always have like dirt underneath their fingernails.
So then what else we know is that they're not being watched by an adult.
For sure. No.
So like their parents are probably off working or dead, or like some kind of way they're not getting the parenting that you might see among the other village kids.
I think it's got to be like, because the city that we're talking about is more of a big village than a city, right? And so the parents are probably doing their chores and trying to contribute to the city and contribute to the village, whether it's farming or whether it's harvesting a little bit more of the stone to bring in so that they can build more houses, or I don't know, stonework, mason work.
So we have what we know about the village now, right, is that there is a gang of, maybe gang is the wrong word, but a group of these furbolgs that go up into the mountain to harvest stone.
Yeah.
There's probably a certain kind of stone that they're looking for, or certain quality at least.
Mm-hmm.
We know that there is the harvesting class that is going to collect their food.
Yep.
There may be hunters as well.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of village where it's very subsistence based. So we just learned that. We've learned that these two kids, Avasia and Sarah, are out there just making games up for themselves. So who's to say that they're, maybe the normal system is that kids will start going to work with their parents at a certain age, or let's say they start going at a certain age,
like 12 or 13 or something, right? That part of your coming of age is slowly going into that cave, but before that, you kind of need a aid in helping the village, or aid in helping the city before you can even get into that coming of age ceremony.
Like some gap years in there where it's like you need mom to watch after you up until you're like 5 or 6, and then you have from say 7 to 11, and those years are just yours, and that's maybe like part of the culture here.
Those years are like the older siblings are watching the younger siblings.
Yeah, and the older siblings have jobs now, right? So
yeah, and now they're like the torch is slowly getting passed on. So whenever they go up to, we also know there's a ruined part of the town that nobody likes to go to because of the avalanches, and so maybe that's where a lot of the traditions that were passed down from one kid to the other. It's like, well, this is how we did it. So maybe they're playing wall ball with a the tennis racket ball, not the tennis racket,
racquetball
ball. Yeah,
the little rubber ones. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, those hurt so bad.
That's so bad.
Yeah, so like there's a lot of different stuff that we know already about them.
I like the mental picture of like Avasia pacing back and forth, his first time in front of, like, say it's a big thing. It sounds like it's a big thing, passing down knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like every group or subgroup in the village attends classes basically for the people that are one up, like a little bit more tenured. So I like the picture of Avasia pacing back and forth in front of this group of like toddlers, expressing what he's learned about now that he has grown up into this next group. You know, it's like kids that age that are very, a lot of bravado, not a lot of information,
It's like Sokka at the beginning of Avatar.
Yeah, exactly. And so, maybe there's like I said, these little classes, or maybe there was like the Little Rascals, the Woman Haters Club, or whatever, the little treehouse. There's some version of that where it's like there's a pile of rocks where all the kids go to share their knowledge, and maybe that's like part of their day, every day or every weekend day or something. Maybe when once there's been a proper harvest and all the parents are cooking and they're trying to get rid of the kids that don't have a purpose there.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they all go off to this like stone place and they share their information about life.
And what if there's like this sacred place that the kids go to, and there's avalanches, right? So there's rocks of certain size, and every kid that kind of like takes charge, or once they get into this leadership role, whenever they move out and have to start working with their parents or working with the adults, they have to put another rock on top of the rock. And so like there's this like weird monument of rocks that kind of goes up, and it's only gone like 12 or 13 high since the last avalanche. And when the next avalanche happens, it's like, oh no, history has been lost. The history of, it's only been like maybe a generation or two, right? But it's like the history of so-and-so and the wealth and knowledge has been erased, and now they have to start anew. And it's kind of an honor to be the new person after the avalanche or after the rock fall.
The devastation of the youth, right? Like,
yeah,
this is something that means everything to them that no one else in the village cares about even a little bit.
Oh, right. Exactly.
Like kids will come home crying about this, it's
Right.
just not a big deal. I love that. I love like subcultures in the youth of a village. I think is such an interesting thing. Any town I've ever been in, at least when I was young, is like there's this whole subculture around. Like we had a playground when I was growing up that was made of wood,
Mhm.
and it was like 8 feet off the ground. Like this was like made by someone from the town,
Yeah.
and it was totally unsafe. It was like minimum 2 or 3 kids were breaking bones there every summer, like
Yeah.
because we would play fort, and that was like known to our town. It was like who won fort last week.
Oh, cool.
And so everybody would show up on the same basic days. I think it was like Wednesday and Saturday. And so you show up and, the kid who won last time is up there already.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to repel people. And it's like you climb up any of the 10 ways to climb up there, and they're just like throwing punches and shoving. And like, it was an all out brawl to be
Yeah.
the last one up there, so that the next time you could be standing up there as
That's
like
what's
the
up.
king of the fort,
Yeah.
and it was just the coolest thing. Doesn't matter at all. None of our parents cared other than the
Right.
broken bones and the
Yeah.
bruises. Right. But yeah, that was like a subculture thing for me growing up. And so anytime I can throw that into a story, I think is the coolest.
I think that's one of the things we as adults tend to forget is the subcultures that we had when we were kids. Because now it's like, oh, I don't want to deal with the kiddos, or I really don't want to pay attention. I want to pay attention to the people who are my age now, and I want to hang out with them and be in our own kind of subculture, But some of the stuff that you came up with as a kid, and some of the stories that you told yourself, and the clicks that you made, and the games that were important to you, I think it really helps world build your story when the kids are doing something and the adults are reacting or not reacting, because then it gives a sense of relationship to both the adults and the kids, and it gives you a vibe. If kids are playing, it's probably a decent town, or I think it's a decent town, right? Because then there's like a healthy community of kids having fun, And then if you don't have that, it's kind of like this weird absence of like, where's the joy? Where's the kids laughing? Where are the kids that are up to no good and getting disciplined? Or is there too much of that? And what does that mean in your world if you have a kid, laughs and steps out of line and gets switched? I think it really can bring a lot of emphasis to your world, how you have kids in your world.
I think there's also another cool thing that Stephen King has done to great effect is reminding us rather of the fear that is a part of being a child and not having complete control of your life or understanding everything in life. Not that we as adults understand everything, but we either like to think we do or like to avoid the parts we don't. And so as a kid, it's like you are very affected by things that make you afraid, and and like those little subcultures of victory. You're very affected by your place in the hierarchy, and it's a great way to if you base a mission, a quest, if you base part of your story around kids, then you can introduce those ideas of like harmful magic that maybe you don't know a lot about, like soft magic can worm its way in very easily to like kid-centric stories. I think that's just a really cool element. So anyway, that is our first quest from last week. And we've learned a lot about the town. I think that's the family element of town, I think, has been rounded out quite a bit. I wouldn't say it's anywhere near like polished completion, but it's definitely, we've added a lot of elements we didn't have before. I think every time I return to Roween, it's fun because we're just farming for ideas, and it comes so quick. And anyway, I'm enjoying myself. I hope you are at home. Our quest number 2 is Meritus, one of the main leader's advisors, and he gives our PCs, or at least he did last week, gave them a quest to go down into the cave of this god that is waking up from a coma, and he sends them, our PCs, down there to die. Basically, he's betraying them. He's trying to get rid of outsiders. The government here is very anti-outsiders, was what we based this quest on. So
I will let you know, my first thought here when I'm doing AoE is I see leader's main advisor. So now I need to start creating advisors. I need to create the leader. I need to give them at least at bare minimum name. So we should have a name for a leader. And we don't need to do this here right now, but this is where my thought process is going. Name for the leader, advisor, 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 right? Let's say there's 3 advisors. So our leader, let's say our leader does have a good head on their shoulders, but the main advisor, we already know, betrayed our PCs from last week. What if he is still in continual betrayal of the main leader? The main leader is ignorant to the fact that some of the stuff is going on.
Like he's his own faction. Basically, he's operating under the radar and without the responsibilities of leadership, even though that's his end goal.
Exactly. And what if another advisor is also in cahoots with him? And there's one advisor they kind of like, they're trying to push out, they're trying to disregard what they say, but the leader still listens to him. Maybe the leader and advisor 3, who's not a part of Meritus's faction, they were friends when they grew up. They grew up, and with this whole kid thing that we just talked about, they grew up in that, and they were leaders together amongst the kids, and they grew up eventually to become these leaders.
Jealous of the man who actually became leader, because they had their group of 3. It was a strong friendship, but the leader was always like all of the adults' favorite, right? Everybody remembers that from childhood, where there's like one kid that was like the adults just loved him. He could do no wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's this tight-knit group of losers. Just kidding. No, there can only be one kid at the top, right? So one of the group of 3 of the others.
And so that's where I would go with it. I would start creating that, and then kind of creating like, who are we have the leader of Roween, we have his 3 advisors, and who are the other leaders around Roween? Who is the farmer leader? I don't know.
Well, let's sketch it out, right? So like advisors, we already know some things. We know that there is a harvesting leader, say, and he can be over stonework and food. And then there is a religious leader, which is basically dealing with the vines and the dead deity. Not dead, but coma, right?
Right.
There is a religious one. And then there is a third one that would typically in a fantasy city you'd say is war. But since they are secluded, what is that third thing? Is that hunting? Because maybe that falls under gathering. Or is that maybe because it's such a family-based place that it's a family leader? That this is a guy that's like, okay, well, your kid's been running around a lot and breaking into this house, like truancy basically, or like a police force, community wellness kind of character.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because like I think Attack on Titan does it good, where it's there are 3 factions. There's the people that go out, there's the people who defend the cities, and there's the people who are like the police force. So I'm trying to think like, how would you translate that into this kind of town where there are 3 groups? What is the one that goes out? Are they like a scouting party? Are they the hunting party that also is like the defense? I don't know.
Like
what's
emissaries, scouts, hunters. We said all those already.
Yeah. And you're right. Does that go into the harvesting leader?
Journeyman. Yeah, so maybe it's like there's the harvesting leader, which is everybody who goes out and brings something back, like the retrieval faction,
Mhm.
and then there is the religious faction, and then there is like the judges or the
I feel like the religious leaders might fall into that. So what if this just the third advisor is just advisor leader? Like that
Like-
is just
like
second.
advisor to the leader, basically.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And isn't really like in charge of one thing, but kind of good at all of them. And he's the one that he's like the VP, right?
He's
So
Meritus.
yeah, it could be Meritus.
Gotcha. I like that. So
Because it just doesn't make sense for the city to have like a scouting place. Like I think harvesting leader would be in charge of those hunters and what they bring back, and how they divvy that up to the city.
and it is immediately because of the structure lending itself towards like there's going to be 2 to 3 advisors underneath each one of these, right?
Mhm.
There's like management of the government itself that's going to be under Meritus, right? He's the VP. He's going to be telling people how to be VP. He's going to be having people do his job for him in different ways.
Mhm.
Just like the other guys are going to be teaching people how to be leaders, and they're also going to be overseeing people like, the guys that are out there telling the people collecting rocks what rocks to collect and things like that.
Yeah.
It's like we're building out a structure already.
Mhm.
But I feel like what we haven't talked about much, because we know all these things about how they function and they live, but what is their goal? What is the government's goal? Like, are they, they're anti-outsiders, but why are they anti-outsiders? Like, we know that. So, like, what's the question being, who have they run into?
What if the big avalanche that destroyed half the city came when outsiders came in, and that like to them that belief of we only let people in here who we deem worthy, like they had a bad feeling
Ooh.
about it, and then this avalanche happened, not known to them, and then soon after they got sent to the cave, right? They were some of the first people like, oh, this is how we deal with them. We send them to the cave, but we send them down here.
What if that ancient part of the village was built in a different way? And so it was like outsiders came in and built this part of the village, and then it was like their gift to the village, and it was like they sent all their elders over there to live, and then avalanche, and then everybody's dead. And it was like,
Ooh.
this is the way the outsiders said we should build these houses, and that's why everybody's dead.
Yeah. And that killed the elders, and that's how the current group of 4 are in power now, because it kind of got thrust into it. These are the people the adults said, our main leader was the one who should be the next leader because he's always been in that role. And then the other 3 are kind of, like you said earlier, are kind of like meh against the main leader, but they will take that role as advisor.
Yeah, because this is the reason I use that as a inciting as incident is because this is a very age equals status culture.
Yep.
Very appreciative of the elderly, this culture.
Yeah.
So removing that is a very impactful thing. And it's something that will also add a scar into anybody who lives here, right? This is the loss of the elders is something that is known but not talked about. It's just a pain that is in everybody. And so like that also gives us a layer of darkness that we can play with. Anyway, yeah.
Maybe that's why Zero was there and, kind of moving to the next quest. But like she was a part of the group of people there. Like the elders were there and she was.
There's one house left standing.
Well, yeah, it could be. But I mean, that's corrupted now. So, but she could have been there. And like, let's say when she was young, the rocks like crushed her ankles or something and they never got healed. So she's always had this hobble and she's always stayed kind of now that she's been transferred out of that area. She's a survivor. I don't know, just throwing it out there. I'm just my brain started going there. Like, what if she has some ties to that side, but now stays outside of the village and she kind of feels like, I don't know, like it wasn't their fault. What if she knows something? I don't know.
Like maybe she's the only person that was willing to forgive, so she's ostracized at that point almost.
Yeah, and kind of outcast, but still, as she grew in her age, she is still that person that's like, hush, hush, we don't talk about them. And, we take care of her, but we don't.
Ooh, what if, okay, so she's the only elder left, right?
Okay.
Okay, so she's the only one who survived that avalanche, maybe. Okay, so she is the only one that is willing to talk about it because she is an elder. She's wise. She understands that it's time to move on. All the other people are younger and they don't understand that yet.
Mhm.
And so that is why she is kicked out, because she keeps bringing up this unspeakable thing that nobody can seem to move past.
What if Meritus had a vision of the avalanche and didn't tell anyone?
Ooh.
And what if the group of them, like when they went for their coming of age story, had these visions of like death and destruction, and then nothing ever, but they didn't say anything because they're like, oh, this is our chance to rise to power. And then it just didn't turn out the way that they wanted it to.
I love that.
And then she keeps talking about it. Because maybe she had I don't know. Like there's more to flush out there, right?
It's like
there's
she's unraveling their secrecy, and she's forcing them to keep coming back to that truth, and forcing other people, I guess, by talking about the truth, to then start asking questions.
Yep.
I like that a lot because it's built in a little bit as well, in that there's a religious leader that is a part of the advisors, and so it's almost like they have their own communing circle or their own group of people that it's like they're looking for answers together. And maybe the three of them, have some magical abilities that they're able to then tap into something, and then they're able to have these visions, right?
What if, like we talked about last week, like the cult that's eating the plants or eating the vine? What if that is like sacrilegious, and that is like death upon harm to any of the plant? But once they took a bite, they realized like, oh, you can gain certain abilities, but it comes at a cost, whatever the cost is. Like we can figure that out later. And they're trying to protect. I had a train of thought. I just lost my train of thought.
It's like they're getting magic from doing this, but it's also eating away at them in some regard.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Because this is like, it's adding to, like, once again, I try to break it down into three things. We have the inherent good, which is the fun of the kids, and this unbridled, the magic that is youth, and just their interacting with the world in a really fun way that is like parent endorsed because of the society. But the society we've made is not inherently good.
Yeah.
And so, we always have to then add in this temptation, this pull towards evil. And that's what I think this cult basically, maybe that is also something that the leader of the tribe doesn't know anything about.
Right. Yeah, of course.
That it's a secret thing that maybe a third or a tenth of the tribe members know about and go to.
Yeah.
That's such a cool thing that it's like it's a big group of people, and it's definitely negatively affecting the village as a whole, but it's it's not prevalent maybe. But let's put a pause in that, because I feel like my brain is slowing down just a tad.
That was like, I think that was an extreme amount of like, oh, what if this? What if that? Again, we talk about the exponential creation process, and that's what AOE is, right? Is trying to really expand upon that and really get into the minutia of, okay, what if this thing? What if that thing? What if this thing? And then what sticks, and then creating that and sticking that into our clay that can be molded later.
And it is a bit chaotic to listen to, so we appreciate your patience and hanging with us. And normally, like, the last thing that we mention is what we're hanging with, and that's why we move on. So I'm sure that's apparent. I'm just throwing it out there. What were you gonna say?
Yeah. Thank you for listening to that through almost 50 minutes of us kind of bouncing back and forth between our own examples and then Roween. And then I hope it sparked some type of creation or creativity in you, because there's a lot of things that we bounce back and forth that I'm definitely going to be adding into my own world, and definitely going to be adding into Allegatia and then in the campaign I'm creating, because I think that really adds a unique element to your world, and all of it adds a lot to it. You don't have to always have a corrupt government, but man, it makes a good story.
Yeah, and even I mean, you even said that it was just like this specific person is,
Mhm.
and they just happen to be close to power,
Yep.
which is an impactful story as well because they've had plenty of time to plan to be in power, and so they have a lot of leverage over who the leader is.
Mhm.
And when the leader finds out, then they're going to try to get rid of them, but that's when they find out about all the leverage, right? But before we continue, let's take a little mental pause for us and for the people listening and talk about what our inspiration is this week. What has been inspiring you, Michael?
Dude. So I've been pretty busy recently, and so my schedule right now is working 2 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. So I'm getting up pretty early, and then I'm still trying to do things in the afternoons. Currently, as of this recording, it's 7 o'clock, and I've been up since 1. So power naps.
That's a lot of hours.
Power naps are great. And so I've been power napping and listening to different music, and to see what my dreams will do. And holy cannoli, my dream just went absolutely wild. So I listen to like every now and then I get into like this Nordic vibe, and I'll listen to kind of like that Nordic chanting music. I like the rhythm of whatever music I'm listening to. I listen to like Sith ambient music as well. Sometimes I have crazy dreams when I listen to that. But I was listening to this Nordic chanting music, and literally it's like boom, 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 and like music's going on, and words are being spoken at like a super low and voice, and it's coming at a rhythm. And my dream was absolutely crazy. I came up with something I would absolutely never come up with in a D&D campaign, and I don't want to say it because it's for one of my players, and I know they listen
right here. No. Yeah.
And I know they listen, and I don't want to spoil it, but it was everything creepy and crazy and weird. And I was like, there's no other way I would have come up to this if I listened to my normal music, because I literally woke up out of a half sleep and I was like, oh, that gave me the creepy crawlies. And I like that. I think I'm going to add that into my world because it's just so different. And I one day I'll tell you what it is, but it is nothing anyone would ever expect that Michael would come up with.
I'm looking forward to that. I think this is just a throwback to one of the episodes we did, experimenting with different states, right?
Yeah.
Because, you're using music in a different state, in a different, we've talked about using music when you go on walks and stuff like that, but I never would have thought to do it while I was sleeping.
I do it all the time. I can't fall asleep without music anymore.
Oh, really?
Dude, yeah. I have Halo 3 ODST music raining. It's like rain music, and it's got a faint Halo background to it, and it's an 8-hour music, and so I can see how long I slept. And then there's Sith ambient music. I dream wild with that. I don't know what it is about it, but I dream wild with that. And so I was trying to do something different, and just a different rhythm to see what my body would do. And yeah, I woke up like ready to play D&D and come up with like weird, wacky stuff.
Nice.
So I mean, the inspiration, I guess, was music, and also I guess was a fear of mine, and putting it into like the world in a different way that my brain put together when I was in that foggy state. It was like that dreamlike state when they tell you like wake up and write your dreams out, because you're never going to remember how wild and crazy it was.
Like lucid dreaming, where did you know you were dreaming?
I mean, kind of yeah, kind of no.
Like enough to change the dream? Or were you I know this is a dream?
It like formed it, and it formed it, and then I had to mold it into like what I wanted it to be, because it was creepy. It was like Anyway, sorry.
Heard.
My inspiration. It's kind of this ambiguous thing, but that's what it was.
Nice. That's dope. That's a solid share, Michael.
And what has been inspiring you?
So this last week, I I don't like documentaries. I'm just going to say, I'm going to start with that. I try not to watch them very often. I'm very, so where like emotions and just general ideas, like even when it comes down to our inspirations, you can tell that my brain is a lot more like, what's the theory behind, what's the philosophy behind, and yours is a lot more, here's a structural element, here's a thing that I changed. And it's like, we're different people like that. And that's why this segment is cool. But for me, it's like, if presented with an emotion that I don't like, I'm going to feel that to my core. If a scary movie, like I don't like watching scary movies that much either. If I really get scared, I would be just terrified. Like I may even, throw up or something, like it's just going to get to me all the way. Yeah. And so something I did this past week to sort of experiment with different things and different forms of inspiration, as I've said several times, I took some time off from creating. And as I'm getting back into it, I wanted to find new ways of inspiring myself or filling the tank. And so I watched this just emotionally devastating documentary. It was about human trafficking, and it was a lot of like really intense stories that were like told in an excruciating detail. And it's stuff that I wouldn't come in contact with normally. It's things that would change how I view life in general. And it's just dark, it's just part of life that, people hurting people for the sake of hurting people or for money. And it's a terrible part of life. And like I said, I wouldn't normally go there, but I thought I'll try it. We're going to see if this is something that's inspirational. And I found that it was, but it may just be because I was looking for inspiration. Who knows? But who cares also? Got something good out of it, and here it is. That it helps me describe something that I wouldn't normally go through, and it helps me describe it authentically. So, like, there's a shorthand for people to identify each other. And people who've been through things that are really hard and really hard to get through emotionally and move on from in your life. When you meet other people that have gone through something like that, there is an unspoken understanding that they share. And that can be said of a lot of different things, any life's pursuits. Like I was homeschooled. I can spot another homeschooler from a mile away. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they're doing. I can spot them.
We can spot them too.
Yeah, I know, right? That's probably true. So anyway, so it helps make your writing rich. It helps make your art rich if you can find those shorthands about all walks of life, whatever it is you're creating about. If you can create that shorthand, that's going to be an amazing boon to your art because, like Rembrandt, he was a great, I believe he's a painter. It was drawing or painting. He illustrated, let's say that. Anyway, so he was a great artist in showing nuanced emotion. And so he drew people almost exclusively, or at least that's the stuff of his I've seen. And they always have these really great nuanced expressions of like kind of questioning. It's like you feel like, it's a picture of kids. You feel like they're looking at a stranger.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's uncanny how well he captures very, very nuanced expression. And he's able to do that because he understands what those expressions are completely. He understands the shorthand. And he just knows his art so well. So anyway, that is my inspiration this week, is me encouraging you to push yourself outside of the bounds of what you would normally emotionally or experientially to have an empathic response towards another group and try to find out what that shorthand is for being a part of the group and how they might recognize each other. That's my inspiration, and that's my charge to you. Watch out for homeschoolers.
They won't talk to you.
They won't. They're wearing jeans up to their armpits. I don't know.
Or they will, honestly.
But anyway, so that being said, I want to go back to Zero one more time, and the political process one more time, and I want to apply the question, maybe this entire episode, see what jumps out, just so I don't limit myself too much. But what is the shorthand? How do people recognize each other that are in this cult, so to speak?
In the cult.
Yeah. Like what is the shorthand to that? Or like Zira is maybe this front person for the resistance towards that cult, right? Every action has an equal opposite reaction. That's probably even more secret than the cult. So how do people recognize each other from that? Like, is there a certain gravity to the way they carry themselves? Is there a certain pendant? Is there a certain hand gesture, or, like they wink to each other? Is there like a pile of rocks that they leave outside of somebody's door to say there's a meeting coming up? Like,
yeah.
What is the...
I mean, there are a lot of good ideas right there with just what you said, like, a pile of rocks, or, like we said, maybe the cult, because they were such good friends when they were young, they had their stone stack. What if it's just a pile of, like, when they're whatever rock number it was when they were kids? What if it's like the 5 rocks, right? So they put the 5 rocks there, or 5 stacks, or something like that. I also think, again, I've been listening to a lot of Aragon, and I know like the elves have a greeting of like touching their fingers to their mouth whenever they're greeting something, or having like a certain phrase. And then that got me thinking to like the Halo Spartans, right? They do hand gestures because they have their visor on, but when they're in their helmets, they still need to communicate their emotions as well. So they have like marks, like they'll go right here for smiling, or like, just different things that different hand motions that you can do to display emotion. That could be like their call sign. The rocks being the 5 rocks, or the 6 rocks being the cult, and maybe the touch to the lips being the resistance. Something as small as that.
We mentioned soul stones before too, like almost like maybe there is a certain ritual. If they don't know how to retrieve somebody from the soul stone, there's a certain ritual of making it into the 5 pieces and then displaying that in their window, something like that is like a fair number of people do it. And it's more of like, it's part of a remembrance ceremony. So if they do it, they may not be part of that group, but there is a good chance they are. And then maybe there's like some other gesture that is paired with that, so that it's not like immediately evident if it's seen. That makes sense.
Trying to think, like, what if there's like some type of symbol, like for the town, right? Or some type of whatever symbol, we'll just say.
Ooh, like a lost family member symbol, because it's like people that have been sent to the cave, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so they've all lost someone. And that's probably why they're in this group. So it's like maybe there is a process that one goes through if they're unaffiliated, or they're down a family member, because it seems like a very family-centric society. So maybe there is like I don't know what it would be, like maybe a tattoo of some kind, or some sort of marking that one goes through at like a funeral, or like a remembrance ceremony that all of them have, and that paired with the stones in the window means that they're part of that group.
Part of the resistance.
Yeah, part of the resistance. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just wanted to get the ball rolling on some more world building here to round us out. One thing I want to do before we leave is sort of sum up where we were before we started the episode with the AOE and where we are now. So before this episode, we had one kid named Avasia, who had a friend that was possessed by the BBEG. We had Meritus, who was an assister to the main. He was the main advisor to the leader of this town, and we had Zira, who was a member of the opposition. And apart from that, we had a jungle town that was largely nature-centric and built on the bones of this god that is in a coma, right? This is what we had. And now We have more stuff than is probably worth summarizing at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
And the point of that, me saying that, is that this was an hour. This was an hour just kicking around ideas. A lot of times we get wrapped up in this idea that meaningful writing time, meaningful creation time is spent on that actual act of creation, on the actual act of drawing, writing, painting, whatever it may be. And moments like this where we just talked about it, we discussed it, we asked questions about what we knew, we pushed ourselves. There was a lot of things that you thought of that I wouldn't have thought of, and vice versa. And I'm sure that's true of the people listening too, where they probably had a ton of really great ideas, and they're probably shouting them at their radio. And so that's what's great about these moments, is like we can build our art a lot in these moments. We can learn a lot, and we can gain from each other's perspectives. And that helps us create really, really quickly and really rich environments. So keep on asking those questions, keep on being empathetic, keep on getting out there and trying to add nuance in as many layers as you can to your world or your creation, because that is what defines mastery, is getting to find those people that really add nuance to their work and really care about each and every line and detail of it. So thank you for joining the Creative Thinker podcast this week, wherever you are in the globe. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.